You can't stop the big feelings. They're going to come, and actually they're a great part of life and learning for our young people. But it's how to help them stay calm and de-escalate it. That's the important life skill that we're trying to teach our little people.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the HSE Talking Health and Wellbeing podcast. My name is Fergal Fox, and today we're speaking with some colleagues from a primary care, Sláinte Care funded initiative called the Lecéala Project in South Dublin. Our guests today are Melissa Vindigni, Senior Occupational Therapist, Muireann Treacy, Clinical Psychologist, and Rosemary Kavanagh, Speech and Language Therapist. These guys are working with parents and young people on an ongoing basis. We're going to be talking about little people, big feelings. We're going to be talking to parents of preschool and primary school age children about their emotions and how to support their regulation and mental well-being. Melissa, it's your first time. Welcome back, everybody else, back to the podcast.
Thanks, Fergal. Great to be back.
So we got a fantastic episode the last time talking about teenage anxiety, and now we're talking about a completely different age range, but we're talking about some of the same things, and I guess some of the same themes are going to come up. So we're talking about those early years. So what kind of age range, what's going on at that stage of development?
Probably important to start with saying that big feelings are incredibly normal and they're a part of life. As young children, we experience them, so we then learn how to name them and eventually, I suppose, regulate and manage them ourselves. When we're thinking about emotions from a developmental perspective, if we start with that infancy, so we start with that newborn baby, they cry when they need something, the parent then responds, they react to safety, voices, touch, smell. At approximately 6 months, a child will begin to learn that if I do something, then I get the response. So if I cry when I feel that hunger urge, then mum or dad or my caregiver comes to me. Moving up to that toddlerhood, that's when they start to interact with us. We start to get the kind of buys. We start to get them pointing at things when they want something. They start to develop empathy. We start to experience the terrible twos. In my house, terrible twos, threes and fours. But we experience those big emotions, but we don't yet have the communication to talk about them. And we don't yet have the bodily experiences or the neurological experience in order to be able to manage them. We then move into preschool. And that's that kind of age 3 to 5. And that's when we're starting to see that development and awareness around emotions. And that's when we start to see the development of impulse control. So that's being able to manage those big feelings when they come out. And it's important to state that's when we see the start of the development of it. It actually doesn't fully develop. That frontal part of the brain, which is responsible for that control and management, doesn't actually fully develop until they reckon around age 25. So if we think about our expectations, particularly of our young people in those primary school years, we really got to water them right down. They don't yet have the ability to control those impulses. When we move into primary school, we start to see those kind of friendships, those kind of emotional reactions socially. They start to develop that sense of self. They develop a little bit more in that empathy, that understanding of the other, but they are still learning to control those emotional impulses. We know that a child from 7 under cannot regulate their emotions by themselves. And when I say regulate, I mean balance them. And that balancing that's very different, I'm sure Melissa will talk about that, for every child. But they can't do that on their own. And that's where we talk about co-regulation.
That's why we call them big feelings.
Yeah.
Because they look bigger
Massive.
than...
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I'm upset, or oh my God, I'm so sad, the world is ending.
And it comes from 0 to 100 super quick. Because they don't have that impulse control, they're working right back there in the back of the brain in that real emotional centre. And it comes out so quick because that emotion control that we have in our early teens or as adults isn't quite there. So it's that kind of volcano that erupts super quick. Where you're in the supermarket and you suddenly turn around because you said no to a toy or to something on the shelf and they're having a complete, breakdown on the floor. That's all normal because they don't have the ability to manage, control, to do any of those things. They need us to help them do that.
And the key message of all what you said there is this is normal.
This is normal. It'll be a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. It's outbursts, and the phrase is throwing your toys out of the pram.
Yeah.
So what's the parent going through then? Early years, I think of a new parent or maybe even an experienced parent. No matter how much experience you have, you're going through those early years, you're going to be faced with, bang, there's a change of emotion. Am I going to get sucked into it?
Well, we can get sucked into it. When we talk about co-regulation, we talk about managing our emotions, so therefore we can model and support them in managing theirs. So the key phrase from our talk today is when our calm meets their storm. That's when co-regulation happens. We can't stop young people from feeling their feelings. And in fact, they should feel them because experiencing their feelings helps them understand and name them. So we can't stop the big feelings, but what we can do is we can help them calm. And we can make an environment or a situation where they feel comfortable and safe expressing them. So then over time, they can learn what they are and how to regulate themselves. That's a long process, isn't it?
And I think understanding other things about their development as well, all the development that's happening in those preschool and early primary school years. So from my own perspective, in terms of communication development, so language is a developmental skill, obviously. So they're maybe saying their first words between 12 and 18 months, and it's sort of flowing thereafter if everything is going well with communication development. But it is a developmental skill. So a 2-year-old is not going to be able to communicate the same way as a 5-year-old. So we need to kind of manage our own parental expectations around what children can say, what children can understand as well. So the understanding is something that maybe is a little bit less obvious. So that's developmental as well. So children learn to understand vocabulary and sentence structure gradually. So when we're talking to them, we need to kind of match their level if we want to get our message across to them. So if we're talking too much or using long sentences or words that are too tricky, the younger child is not going to understand. And so that just adds to the overwhelm and the kind of experience of feeling anxious and feeling worried and feeling upset and feeling like everything is just too much. And so we need to be really careful about that in terms of matching the child's level of communication as well when we're talking to them or when we're trying to be with them and help them calm.
When does this become an issue? This is an issue in your house and you think, oh, I can manage this. But if this is an issue in the public, you're really struggling. Like if you're having challenges going shopping and you have to go shopping. I remember even like our first child. It was so easy, I thought. Just pop the little toddler into the trolley and she was very compliant. And then I had a couple of lads and it was just, it'd be crawling all over the place. And it was just so challenging. And then pulling things off the shelves or screaming. You're coming out of the shop and you're just soaked in sweat. And you thought, why did I bring them? Why didn't I just... Parents can't always make that decision. So that emotional outburst, I guess, is normal, but like it still has to be managed by the parent. So what's your advice to parents around that?
It starts with the self. It's managing yourself, so therefore you can manage the other. And I think you touched on something quite interesting there, Fergal, around kind of those gender differences. There are some gender differences and not only gender differences, but individual differences in what young people seek and what they need. And I suppose some of that comes back to the body and the sensory experience. There is some research out there saying that girls have a little bit more of an ability to manage their emotions and their impulse control. Not all girls at a younger age, and that boys still live in that evolutionary rough, tumble, threat, fight place, so that their emotions actually come out even bigger maybe than little girls. But I don't want to gender stereotype either. I think it's really helpful to look at it from that kind of sensory perspective. So when we're hitting and we're flailing about the place, it just looks like we're hitting and flailing about the place, when in fact the body is getting some gorgeous feedback in those moments. When you see a toddler on the ground and they're hitting the ground and they're screaming, they're getting so much gorgeous sensory feedback. Or when they're crying and you come in as a parent with that big bear hug, that can feel really, really great, can't it, Melissa?
Yeah, and I think there's that body piece, right? When your body is calm, it's easier to do everything. And that's really linked in with your emotions. So I was just thinking, think of like a play center. Fergal, you were talking about the environment. Say you're going to go when school's in, so it's like 8 o'clock in the morning, no one's up yet. And you're able to sit there and you're watching your child play and it's nice and quiet and you're enjoying the experience, your child going down the slide safely, walking around in the ball pool. Now it is noon and it is packed in there, right? And the kids are like throwing the balls around. There's children crying, children screaming, children running past you. Your child gets pushed in the action. That environment is totally changing how your body feels, your child's response to what's going on, and your body's response. That's just an important thing to say too. When your body is calm again, the way you're reacting is different as well.
For a parent and the child.
Oh, yeah. And again, it's that two-piece, right? It's much easier, Muireann was saying, when your calm meets their storm, or when you're both calm, it's easy, right? That nice, quiet play center. And that loud play center, there's two storms. And so both of your bodies are feeling really intense feelings.
We spoke about that when we were talking about the teenagers, because that it was a journey for the parent as well as the child. And the examples that you're given there, it's the same thing for that early childhood piece. The parent's own emotional state is a factor, and we don't usually consider that. We're looking at, oh, my child had an outburst. I'm not saying what was going on for me. I didn't like the outburst, whatever.
And it can be helpful to try and just put yourself in their shoes and think of something that makes you feel like that. So for me, because I have a really bad sense of direction. So if I'm in the car and I don't know where I'm going, and the radio's on and the kids are in the car with me or something, and I'm thinking, I have no idea where I am. I couldn't take a guess about whether going left or right. So I have to turn off the radio. I have to tell everyone to stop talking. That's a situation that's making me feel uncomfortable in my body, and I can't focus on driving the car unless all the other kind of stimuli are gone. So trying to think about what makes you feel like that. And it can happen quite quickly as well. And for little people, who are developing all of these skills and have, limited communication, etc., it can happen even faster. And so that's why you see in the supermarket, now they're suddenly flailing around on the ground. It looks like it's happened really fast, but it might have been building up for, a little while.
Yeah, it's normal. And as you were saying, Muireann, they might be actually regulating if they're banging the floor. Like a tantrum, I never thought a tantrum was a regulation exercise, but the way you're describing it is actually, I'm getting something out of this.
Have you ever felt so frustrated that when you let out a big scream or roar and then afterwards your body just goes, that felt really great? And that can be the same for our little people, that actually, because they don't have those communication skills yet or the ability to manage the emotion, they'll show us sometimes before they'll be able to tell us.
And I think the big thing is everyone's body is so different. I was talking about that play center at noon. You were thinking, whoa, you can see it and it can be stressful. But for some kids, those bright lights, that noise is actually regulating. They feel great. They're able to play their best. So I think that is the big thing. And that's the tricky bit, isn't it? I think for parents, it's like you have to be the detective. It could be different day to day or different situations. You mentioned that last time. It's about just taking a step back and trying to be a detective. What worked before in different environments?
What I seem to hear as a key word is co-regulation. So it's the parent and the child. You're tied invisibly emotionally, and you don't want the child to be having these outbursts or whatever, but like, it's going to happen. Let's just get used to it. Like it's, they're going to be very sad. They're going to be very, very happy. They're going to be very upset. And you need to take a breath, or you need to find yourself before you go in.
Yeah. Our kids cannot regulate themselves, particularly in those primary school years and particularly the under sevens, without the other. So they are directly impacted by us, how we're reacting. So one of the most, I suppose, valuable things for me as a parent that I've learned is that I can model. I don't do it the whole time, but if I can press the pause button and model calm and model regulation for my young person and not get pulled into that storm that I'm sure has been created all around us, that's the most helpful thing in that situation. Again, it's going back to that piece. You can't stop the big feelings. They're going to come. And actually, they're a great part of life and learning for our young people. But it's how to help them stay calm and de-escalate it. That's the important life skill that we're trying to teach our little people.
And what do we want in terms of their emotional awareness or awareness of their emotions? Do you say to the child, oh, it's sad because we have to leave the softball play center. I know you're sad. They're bawling crying because they have to leave there. I know it's sad we have to go, but we have to go now. Our time is up. Like, do you kind of acknowledge their feelings, or do you name it? Or how do you don't sit them down in the classroom and go, we're going through emotions today. So how do you build up their emotional awareness? Do you use that through vocabulary or?
Yeah, and I think for this age group, so visuals are a really important thing to think about. So as well as having the little chats and the conversation and keeping your language really nice and simple, remember you're trying to match the level that they're at in terms of their own communication skills. And a side point, I suppose, that, lots of children are entering school with delays in terms of their developmental communication. So they're, maybe even a little bit further behind in terms of how you might talk with them about their emotions. So we need to really think about that. But using pictures, using videos, showing them, I think you mentioned someone, has a picture depicting lots of emotions. So having visual aids to help you through these conversations can be really helpful. Looking at pictures on the phone, watching movies like Inside Out, where there's a really vivid depictions of kind of the emotions and what they feel like in the young person's body. So those can be really helpful kind of catalysts for having the conversations, I suppose. Not in the moment, obviously, of the outburst, but later when the child is a little more regulated.
Yeah. So he was trying to thread in any conversation and using cartoons or anything to go, how do you think they're feeling? Instead of talking about that outburst you had last week.
Because that's gone.
Yeah, that's gone, yeah.
Yeah, but also, Fergal, you were talking about when they're having that outburst, just being with, and you were saying they're angry. Yeah, name it. You're angry. A little flashback comes to me of my niece, and she's 4. And she was really upset because I was sitting it was a chair in the house. And she was like, get out of my mother's chair. And I was thinking in my head, well, this is everyone's chair. I'm in my mom's house. This is grandma's house. And get out of that chair. And I wanted to laugh because her little finger was coming in, but that wasn't what she was feeling. And if I laughed, I would have sent her over. And instead, it took a lot. I took a little deep breath and I said, you're very angry right now because I'm sitting in, the chair, but I'm not moving. This is everyone's chair. And so she stormed off. And then she took a little break and she came back to me and then she started talking about something else. So like those little emotions, they switch so fast. And the fact that I was just with her and named it for her, that was enough for her. And that was okay. And then she came back. She's like, "You want to play a game?" And I said, "Okay."
This is the rest of your afternoon taken care of.
Yeah. And those big emotions, when they hit you, we were talking about how your body reacts. Your body does react. I think, my muscles got tight.
Isn't that amazing? Like, like you're right. But I didn't even think of it that way. Like, even when a child throws their emotion at you, like, ugh, you're very much invited to react. Your body wants to react. Back to that primal stress, your emotional expression. Take a moment.
I loved, though, Melissa, in that story, how you allowed her to repair. You allowed her, she had the big feeling, she went away, she did whatever she came back and said, "Hey, let's play a game." And you might still be feeling it, but you're like, "Yeah, let's play the game." So I can have these big feelings and I can repair the relationship or the connection if it was lost in that moment of my big feeling.
Yeah, and I think you have to also say in your head, she's little, she's 4. She doesn't mean she's going in and out. It took a lot. And even like a deep breath, I had a little chuckle to myself when she left the room. And if it was a bigger emotion, how does my body feel? We talked a lot about pausing, take a step back. What works for you? For me, deep breathing really works. And like I go back to the senses, like what do I need to do to get my body to feel calm? For me, it's always a long, deep breath or like classical music. But for someone else, that might not work at all. So it's about tuning in to what makes your body feel good to help you to calm, to help you to deal with those big emotions because they're big. And then what might help you to be calm could be totally different for your child. And sometimes there's a mix match of what makes you feel calm that could be different than what makes your child feel calm. So in that case, like Rosemary, you sort of talked about that. It's about just regulating yourself first so it's safe. You don't want to crash your car when you're driving. You need to make sure, your body feels good. And then you can help your child.
And I wonder, can we catch it in that early escalation? So when we talk about a big feeling, we talk about the little ripples in the sea turning into this big wave of emotion. And sometimes when we can catch it in those early stages, we can put something in place that might kind of bring the big feeling down a little bit. It could be a sensory strategy. It could be distraction. It could be, novelty, a bit of fun. But it's noticing those little ripples. It's knowing your child and it's noticing those little ripples when they come. I know for one of my young people, when I notice that the seeds are starting to grow for a little big feeling, I notice that they start to run more. And there's kind of a different expression on their face. And it's at that point then that I might get into some heavy lifting. Or I might be like, right, let's get out into the back garden and you can kind of rugby tackle me or you can do something. And it brings them down a little bit. Because sometimes I think we only notice it when the feeling's gone past that at the top of that escalation curve. So if we think about a bell curve, and at that point, that's where we need to just let it be and let it come down. Because intervening at that point, we've almost kind of lost it, have we? It's either at the start or at the end that we need to put in some of those supports.
Or even before. So I'm thinking about, little people, big feelings, and maybe sometimes going to like a new place or something unknown can really kind of cause a big feeling. So they don't know what to expect. They don't know how long this is going to take. They don't know when they're going to get to go home. They're not sure what's expected of them in this new place. So maybe they're going to like a different swimming pool or something. Okay. So you can prepare by showing them pictures of it before you go. This is what it looks like. This is the changing room. Actually, lots of swimming pools now have lovely visual schedules on their websites that show the different areas of the pool. And I'm picking the swimming pool because that can be a bit of a sensory overloading experience. It's noisy, there's the water, etc. So preparing in advance, again, using visuals maybe to aid that conversation that you're having with them, showing them what's going to happen, how long it's going to last, what's going to happen when that's finished, can be really helpful in terms of sort of preventing some of those big feelings from getting, as Muireann says, up to that higher level.
Yeah, I'm thinking the example that you gave there, Melissa, that there was an opportunity. You could have made it worse. If you don't see this girl is coming to you with an attitude and some emotion that if you don't take a beat, you can make the situation a lot worse, or you can bring them into a situation where it's very difficult to de-escalate. I'm reminded of the model that you brought to the episode that we spoke about teenagers and anxiety. We were talking about your reaction as a parent to the child's issue or what the child is coming up with. And you mentioned the concept of meeting their storm with your calm. Can you bring us into that again, how it applies to these early years as well?
I suppose it's the concept that the feelings and behaviours of the people close to us and around us directly impact how we feel and respond. So the idea is if a young person is having that big feeling and they're in that storm of that big feeling, if we can stay calm and regulated, then that will help bring them down to that calm place. So that's what we call co-regulation, where a young person is feeding off our feelings and our reactions, and they're starting to co-regulate and become calm with us. Take the opposite to that. If I'm having a really mad day at work or something's happened maybe on the way home and I come in with a storm and they're having a big feeling moment, if a storm meets a storm, so it's just going to be fire. And that's okay. Those moments are going to happen. But I suppose as a parent, knowing that co-regulation piece, especially for those younger years, is a vital part of them learning their emotions, expressing their emotions and learning how to self-regulate in later years. If we can stay calm and meet their storm with that calm, that will help bring them down to that place. The 3R model, which was developed by Dr. Bruce Perry, who's an American psychiatrist, researcher, developed the neurosequential model of thinking. And I suppose he talks about the 3Rs as a way of managing big feelings or trauma or anxiety that maps onto the brain. And what I was talking about earlier, that back part of the brain being that survival, that's where our emotion center is. And we need that lovely forward part of the brain, that cortex, for that thinking, reasoning, language, being able to name things. When we're supporting somebody with a big feeling, we got to go right back with them, back to that emotional center place, because that's where they're working from. So we go to that regulate place. So we stay with them. We encourage them, make sure that they're nice and safe. And we model kind of stuff like deep breathing. We decrease our language at that point. So when we're in a place of a big feeling of anger, for example, we're really feeling it. That connectivity to that frontal lobe, that kind of language center, that's disconnected. It's not firing the way that it should. So when I'm there with my young person who's really angry going, calm down now, what's going on? What's blah, blah? And I do that still as a parent. I'm making the situation worse. I'm prolonging that big feeling because I'm flooding them even more. I'm keeping them in that place. So when I talk about that kind of regulate, we go back to less words and we go back to the body. Then we move on to the next R, which is the relate. And this where things are a little bit calmer and we try to understand it from their perspective. They might want a colourful tin of something on the shelf and we're kind of going, it's just a tin of whatever. But from their perspective, that's what they wanted. Or they might have perceived something as being bigger than it is, but we have to walk in their shoes in order to understand it. After that, after we've related, we know we might name the emotion like you did in your example, Melissa, yeah, I get you feel angry. We're not trying to fix it. We're not trying to solve it. We're just relating to it. Then we move on to the reason. And we move to that talking through and some of that lovely solution-focused or problem-focused pieces that Rosemary was talking about in the last podcast. That's when we bring in the language. We're still not using really long sentences. We're still not trying to fix it, but we're being curious and staying in that detective place. One thing to kind of note is that when we've had one of those huge feelings and it's gone through that whole escalation curve, to be able to get to that place where we reason. As a parent, I want to get in there straight away. I'm obviously being a psychologist. I want to talk through it. Let's break it down. And actually, it might take a young person 40 minutes, an hour, even the next day before their body feels in a place where they can talk about it. So it's holding on to that as well as a parent going, I want this to be okay. I want to fix this for them. I want to understand this. Sometimes we have to tolerate our own uncertainty and tolerate, actually, they're not ready for that. They might need a bit more time.
Yeah, that time and stepping back, that's a big challenge. You're asking the parent to regulate and you're asking them to be rational about the child's need for regulation. As you said, the temptation is to zip in and say, look, I've seen this before. This is the problem. You need to do X. Find your own chair.
Take lots and lots of deep breaths. Meanwhile, if you're modelling it, it's different to going, now to breathe in. Like you're kind of modelling it, showing them rather than telling them to do it.
Yeah. So what kind of things are happening for children at these ages? They're in the home, they may be going to preschool, they may have the challenge of the transition to primary school. Are these going to evoke emotions or this is part of the grown-up journey?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is preschool or primary school. There's so many demands. Sit in your chair, wait in your chair, line up, eat your lunch. And I mean, you're eating your lunch in 5 minutes. It's boom, boom, boom. They have to meet that. All those expectations in school. So their little bodies, they hold it, they hold it, they hold it. And then what you might see is they come out of school and they're losing it because they've held it in all day. They haven't had a little break to reset their bodies. And so that can be something that can affect you. The parents talk about, my child's so good in school, but at home, because they feel secure with you. They've been holding it together. So that's where we talk about those little sensory breaks, little movement breaks, what works for their body to help them to be calm, because that's that little bit where they're resetting, isn't it? So it's not building. You get to reset. So whether it be squeezing a little squeezy ball, right now, all the schools, they do the little go noodle. They're dancing, following little dance moves on the screen, little mindfulness video, deep breathing, running. But again, remember, everyone's body is different, and what works maybe for me might not work for you. So that's a bit about being a detective.
And you're right, they sometimes hold it in school and they then have the big meltdown when they come home where they feel securest and safest. I can show you the worst side of myself and you're not going to judge me. And that's the place where home is. And sometimes we get these emotions when they come in the door and we've no idea what has built up to that. But we're still there trying to put in the strategies to try calm it. So I'm thinking of some of those sensory attachment pieces of, instead of going straight into the homework, how do we say that kind of sensory calm regulatory scene for them at home? Is it giving them some food, which is lovely and it's a nice sensory piece? Is the home environment nice and calm? Can they take kind of a breather for a few moments? Do they need to go out and play? And actually sitting in that chair all day is just too much for my body, my mind, and I need to go out and just run.
The way you're describing it, Melissa, we don't often consider it's a bit of a straitjacket that we're putting the child into preschool. Like you have to sit down. I'm thinking, yeah, of course you have to sit down. We expect these adult society things just to land with a baby or a child or a toddler. In primary school, they can be a bit, you're expected to pay attention, you're expected to take up a pencil and get to work. The expectations maybe are a bit, we need to be a bit reasonable about it. As you said earlier on, put yourself where the child is, the development stage.
Yeah. And I suppose there's a lot of pressures as well on teachers. There's a lot to get done in school. But I think in general, schools are way better now at understanding and putting these strategies in place in the classroom.
Oh, yeah, they're great. It's that teamwork bit too, because as a parent, you're not in the school. And so you can talk to the teachers, and they're doing great things in the schools. They're doing lots of movement breaks. They're really in tune with the sensory needs of the child, movement breaks. You'll see all these different things within the school. And then they're having those breaks, resets, running around, those kind of things.
Flexible seating that's coming in is super interesting. I remember doing school observation recently and the kids were down on their bellies with these tables that they could then work on. Instead of having to sit in the seat, they were getting lovely regulation through their bodies from being on their bellies and writing that way. So the schools are trying out different things. They're trying to, I suppose, follow the lead with that.
We were talking about sensory engagement for the teenagers. I see it nearly easier for the young children because there seems to be more materials made and more allowances made for those early years. We don't make sensory items for teenagers that much, or it's not that popular a concept as far as I can see, but it's nearly like we push them on the preschoolers and the primary school children. You're going to need these nice things, or it's nearly like my blankie version of whatever. You need some version of that as you're kind of going through those early years.
Yeah, well, play tends to be really sensory. Think about digging in the sand, or even going to the beach, playing in the mud,
jumping on the trampoline.
Yeah, if you think about it, we're all sensory beings, and little children, that's what their body needs. And, usually a sensory activity, it should always be fun because your body needs that input so it can process, so you can have a calm body, so it's easier to do things. And play is fun for kids. That's what kids do. It's all through play.
Yeah, so that kind of reminds me, the tip, Muireann, is watching the emotions and engaging with some of those things like play, like physical, that's going to regulate or de-escalate, depending on where you're at. That co-regulation and that thinking about what's your support system. We're talking about the teenager, we're talking about the support system that might be your partner, or might be your mother, or your family members, or your community. But your support system might be physical things in the house for these babies or for these young children. It could be a range of different things. I guess that's why story time is nearly like a regulation exercise, isn't it?
Absolutely. But if you think about story time, you're normally cuddled up beside the young person. There's that proximity, the tone of your voice, all of that is kind of coming into play. It tends to be a very nurturing, cuddly time when you're regulated during that time, and therefore your young person is regulated. But you're right, there's lots of things that you can put into the home that actually help with that. Because I always think with the adolescents, even though we shouldn't always jump to the thinking and the verbal, I'm conscious of what you said the last time, Rosemary, but with the young kids, it goes back to the body, doesn't it? It's always, how do I get them back to their body, understanding their body? And in our house, we have a pull-up bar. And again, people might think for primary school kids or toddlers, why would you have a pull-up bar? Because they can hang off it. and they can swing off it and they can get loads of lovely regulation in their body right before we do story time. So I'm regulating them at different points throughout the day rather than waiting for that big moment where the wave comes.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Muireann. It's that bit, if anything is challenging, say dinner time, sitting at the table. Well, what helps them to sit at the table? Maybe it's a run around. Maybe it's run up and down the stairs in your house, or go out in the yard and run around in a circle, or crawl up the stairs, or do animal walks, or maybe play classical music while you're sitting at the table. It's to look at what do you have in your environment and how can you use it to change the body. You don't have to get anything special. It can be something as simple as the couch cushions on your couch, and you can give your child a little squeeze, or even a bear hug, or wrap a child up in a blanket, put rice in a container and your child can put their hands through, or find little objects.
Yeah, I love that. It doesn't have to be extra. One of our children used to have a fascination of making tents, but basically just putting a sheet over a couch or over two chairs and getting them and their friends, when there be somebody coming to visit, into the tent. But the tent could be made with nothing. And like, they create a mess, obviously, but like, it was such, there's just something about going into a little dark area and there's like a secret den all of a sudden, and it costs nothing. So it's just another example to add to your list there. That's fantastic. We're encouraging parents to look at those things. And as you said, Muireann, be aware of what's a good time or when you need to do this regulation exercise. You might even be calling it regulation, like it's playtime. It's a way of interacting.
When we're thinking about being kind to ourselves as parents, like, what kind of sensory input do we need? Like, as Melissa said, we're all sensory beings. So just because we grow up and we're not playing, it doesn't mean we don't need sensory input to help us kind of feel calm and regulated. And again, circling right back to Muireann's point about our calm has to meet their storm. So we've got to regulate ourselves as well. And what's regulating for our children might not be the same as what's regulating for us. So tuning into that. I'm thinking back to when my kids were much younger and they were all in primary school, and like, it was that crazy get them home sort of, chaos and different pickup times, and you might be up at the school for an hour while you're waiting for the older ones to finish. And by the time you get back to the house, you're just sort of, oh, now we have to do homework. And so I sort of just built in this routine of always making a cup of tea and sitting down with it just when I got home. And it wasn't even drinking the tea, it was kind of holding the cup and the warmth of it that helped me regulate. Not every day, but sometimes. Just take a little break before moving on to the next thing. So it's building little moments throughout the day that help us as parents stay regulated, because then we're going to be able to help our children when they have these tricky, big feelings, as they inevitably will.
Yeah, it sounds like you're taking a bit of a mindful approach to that. Reminds me of what Niamh said in the last podcast that we had around buttering a slice of toast and having a cup of tea with your teenager, just to talk to them. And that process, don't worry about the topic, just make the tea and toast. Make that a little moment that you're not even naming. So your tea is your little mindful moment to regulate before you take the next step. Parents' work is just so endless, isn't it? Like, we need to just acknowledge that parents and those early years parents, every parent at every stage, I suppose. But, when they have those little people, you're anxious. You might be a first-time parent, even if you're not. It's just such a busy space. You're talking about trying to keep the place clean, trying to keep the clothes clean, trying to get the washes done and your food and then the school things come in, and it's just endless, isn't it?
And you're being bombarded with lots of advice from people and also from the internet and from books. There's never been so much parenting advice out there, but actually that can be really tricky to navigate, especially if you feel like maybe things have gone a little bit off kilter or you're not doing a good job. Building in things that maintain that connection with your child. It's your child and you know them. So the book doesn't know anything about your child. There'll be some good advice, obviously, but it's tuning into your child's preferences in terms of sensory, as Melissa said, and in terms of where they're at with their development, and trying to match that. If you can do that, then you're not going to go far wrong.
It's hard to feel like you're doing a good job. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that, because our young people don't come with little manuals. You're learning alongside their development. So you get to a point where you're like, okay, I've got this. I know what's going on. And then they move into another developmental stage and you're like right back to trying to figure out how to respond, how to manage. And it's being compassionate with yourself around that and allowing the mistakes to be made, acknowledging them and knowing that if a storm meets a storm, that's okay. I can go back. I can repair that. It's important to, if there's a rupture in the relationship or the connection, you circle back and you say, you know what, Mummy didn't do that maybe the best way, or I'm sorry I shouted. Maybe I could have done that better. Or ask them, what did you need? If they're in the space where they have that language, what did they need at that moment? And often they'll be well able to say, actually, I needed you to do this. So being okay with not being an expert. You're an expert in your child, but you're not always an expert in how to manage situations or how to react to them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key takeaways for me, is that trying to meet your storm with the calm and having that self-reflection space that you're not always going to get it right.
Yeah.
When you get it wrong, you can say, no, I went at that storm with a storm, or I wasn't able to be calm, wasn't able to regulate myself. So that is an ongoing challenge for parents, and we have to acknowledge that. And then your piece, Rosemary, about the self-care reminds us of the good enough parent that we were talking about in the previous podcast. The good enough parent for the early years. It's challenging, it's busy, and you're going to be getting advice from everywhere, but you need to give yourself a bit of space.
But I think too, say a situation didn't go the way you wanted it to, that's where you can learn, say, oh, what am I going to do next time? So I think that piece, is really critical. If something doesn't work, that's okay. You've gotten more insight that maybe next time you can do it a little bit differently. There's hope there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not putting yourself under the pressure as a parent to get it all right all of the time, to be that Instagram perfect parent that actually just doesn't exist.
Yeah, the Instagram perfect parent doesn't exist.
No,
I think that's the key message. You're going to have all these emotions and you want to support your child through regulating and relating to them and reasoning through them. And you're going to have to be on a bit of an emotional journey yourself as a parent. Is there anything else you want to highlight before we come to the end of this episode?
That it's all normal. That's all normal, for young children. So I suppose it's important to recognise that.
Okay. I'd like to thank you all for coming in to talk to me today. It was really interesting, your insights that you shared. Rosemary Kavanagh, Melissa Vindigni, Muireann Treacy from the Calmness project in South Dublin. Really appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning into another episode. And if you want to get in touch with HSE Health and Wellbeing, you can email us on healthandwellbeing.communications@hse.ie. You can also check us out on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of HSE Talking Health and Wellbeing.